You want to get your head around complex stuff, and you want to do it efficiently, right?
Yeah, who'd
You're
have?
looking for those key insights without getting totally lost in a mountain of information.
Exactly.
Well, that's what we're doing today. We're doing a deep dive into a really powerful way to tackle problems.
And boost your ability to come up with new ideas.
Definitely. Both at work and, just in life generally.
So today we're exploring the decomposition questioning six-ring model. It's from the book AC.
Which translates roughly to deconstructing. The 6 steps to simple and effective problem solving. Sounds promising.
It's a really interesting approach.
Okay, so our mission here is basically to pull out the core ideas. How can you, listening right now, use this to really nail down what the real issues are?
And then find ways to actually solve them effectively.
Yeah. And one thing that really jumped out at me from the source material was this idea that figuring out the right problem, that's way more important than just like jumping to the first solution you think of.
That's a huge point in the book.
Yeah.
It really challenges how we often approach things.
It makes you think, doesn't it? So much of education maybe feels like it's about having the answers ready, not necessarily about getting good at asking the smartest questions in the first place.
Right.
Uh.
And that's sort of the surprising thing the book highlights. We often lose the ability to even find the good questions because we're so focused on the answers.
Huh, okay.
And that's where this model comes in. It gives you a structure, a way to cut through all the surface noise.
To get to the real heart of the problems you're facing.
Exactly.
Mm.
And my job here is to, add some context, maybe some analysis, and help you see how you might actually use this stuff.
Great. So let's dig in. The book really hammers home this point. Before you fix anything, you got to be sure what the actual problem is.
Yeah, they use that iceberg analogy, which I think works really well.
Right, the tip of the iceberg. What we
Yep.
see, the immediate issues.
They're often just symptoms, right? Signs of something much bigger, much deeper lurking underneath. And it's interesting how the book points out our sort of natural tendency to just leap for a solution.
Impatience.
Maybe. There's this anecdote in the preface. People are so eager for a quick fix, they just bypass the critical step of understanding what's really going on.
And the consequence of that, according to the book,
That we can actually kind of unlearn how to spot good questions, how to formulate them. We lose that discovery muscle.
wow. Which, when you think about it, is completely backwards if your goal is to understand something properly without feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. If you solve the wrong problem.
You've just wasted a ton of time and energy, and you're probably more confused than when you started.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the decomposition questioning six-ring model is supposed to help. It's like a roadmap.
To navigate through that complexity.
Yeah, to pinpoint the fundamental issues driving those surface problems.
Okay, let's make this more concrete. The book uses some really well-known examples to illustrate this focus on finding the right problem. Elon Musk comes up first.
Right. He's presented as, a classic problem-solving expert, someone with that innovative personality.
Regardless of what you think about his companies, his method seems interesting.
Definitely. He's persistent, clearly a problem solver. But what's key is how he approaches them. He seems to identify these huge fundamental challenges.
And then what?
And then he just has this incredible knack for breaking them down into smaller sequential questions you can actually tackle.
Okay, give us an example. SpaceX. How does that fit the pattern? It started with something massive, right? Human survival.
Exactly. A huge, almost philosophical problem. Long-term human survival. Okay, so where does that lead?
To Mars. As another potential place for humans.
That seems to be the core question he landed on. Okay, then the question becomes practical. How do we get humans to Mars?
Rockets. Obvious answer.
Obvious answer, but rockets are unbelievably expensive. That's the next barrier.
So the next question has to be about cost.
Right. How do we slash the cost of rockets? Drastically. And that's where the innovation comes in.
Reusable rockets.
Reusable rockets. It wasn't just about building a rocket. It was about solving the cost problem to enable the bigger goal.
And Tesla, similar logic, starting with the energy crisis.
Very similar. Broad problem, energy crisis, leads to a core question.
Yeah.
How do we get sustainable energy?
Okay.
Electric vehicles are one specific piece of that puzzle, but then the immediate problem.
Making them affordable, making them work well.
Yeah, viability, and the big sticking point was batteries cost, performance.
So Musk's answer.
Let's figure out batteries ourselves, develop them in-house. Again, taking a huge problem, breaking it down.
Into solvable chunks and driving innovation that way.
Exactly. It's that methodical deconstruction.
So a key skill seems to be taking these massive, daunting problems and just slicing them up into manageable questions. Okay, let's pivot. The book also uses Salman Khan, Khan Academy. Very different starting point.
Totally different. Much more personal. It started with his cousin, Nadia.
She was struggling with math.
Yeah, even though she was clearly smart. So the initial problem wasn't, global education reform. It was just, how do I help Nadia understand this stuff?
And the book walks through how he sort of questioned his way to the Khan Academy we know today. Can you trace some of those steps?
Sure. So first, the practical problem. Distance. Nadia wasn't nearby.
Right.
Question. How do I bridge that gap? Solution. Remote tutoring. Skype. Yahoo Doodle. Things like that back then.
Okay, basic logistics.
Then he started thinking about how he was teaching. He wasn't a teacher by trade.
Mm-hmm.
So the question became, how can I explain this so she really gets it? He thought about his own learning, realized knowing something doesn't mean you can explain it well.
The classic expert's curse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So question, how do I make these concepts accessible?
Which led to the short, simple videos focusing on basics.
Precisely, those bite-sized lessons. But it didn't stop there.
No.
No, then came scale. Question, how do I help more kids than just my cousins? Solution, put the videos online, YouTube.
Okay, logical next step.
But that raises new questions. Engagement. How do I keep kids focused online?
Distractions are everywhere.
Right. So his solutions, the black screen, focus on content, keep them short and sweet.
Interesting. What else?
Then fragmented knowledge. Students won't seeing how concepts connected.
Ah, the bigger picture.
Yeah. Question. How do I show the connections? Solution. The knowledge map.
Okay.
And finally, the mismatch between teaching pace and learning pace.
The classic classroom problem.
Oh.
One teacher, 30 kids, all learning differently.
Exactly. Question. How to fix that? Solution. The flipped classroom idea. Watch videos at home, do homework in class.
Wow. So looking at both Musk and Khan, it's striking. They didn't just, grab the first solution that came to mind.
Not at all.
They spent serious time digging into the why, understanding the landscape of the problem itself.
That seems to be the shared trait, doesn't it? A real ability to identify and define the core problem clearly.
Plus deep thinking, willingness to experiment.
Absolutely. They weren't afraid to try things, see what worked, and adjust based on that. Critical thinking and adaptation.
Okay, so let's get into the actual process the book talks about for deconstructing problems. It starts with a relatable story from the author's university teaching days.
Yeah, this is quite insightful. The author noticed students were often unhappy with teachers who were like top experts in their field.
Really knowledgeable, but
not effective teachers. Students just weren't getting it, even though the prof clearly knew their stuff backwards and forwards.
and the issue wasn't the teacher's lack of knowledge.
No, not at all. It was a disconnect in communication, in how the knowledge was being shared.
Just because you know something deeply doesn't mean you can teach it well.
Exactly. And the teachers, from their side, felt they were doing their job. They covered the material right.
Check the boxes on the syllabus.
But the analysis showed they weren't really considering the student's perspective. What's obvious to an expert can be totally confusing to a beginner.
Speaking different languages, almost.
Pretty much.
I think we've all been there, on one side or the other. Trying to learn something complex or trying to explain something we know well, it's easy to forget what it's like not to know.
It really is. And the book contrasts this sharply with Khan's approach. His driving question was always,
How do I make students learn better? Centered on the learner.
exactly. Which brings us to a really key concept the book emphasizes for effective problem solving. Metacognition.
Metacognition. Okay, for anyone listening who hasn't bumped into that term, can you break it down?
Sure. Simply put, it's thinking about your own thinking.
Okay.
It's being self-aware of your thought processes, like consciously thinking about how you arrived at an answer, not just the answer itself.
Or like understanding why you reacted emotionally to a movie. Analyzing your own response.
That's another good example, yeah. Stepping back and looking at your own cognitive gears turning.
Like an internal observer watching your brain work.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
And the research the book mentions is pretty compelling here.
What did it find?
Basically, that students with strong metacognitive skills tend to be better problem solvers.
Regardless of other factors, like raw intelligence or knowledge.
Yeah, it seems to be a distinct skill that makes a big difference. It really highlights how important it is to actively review and reflect on how you think.
So it's not just about getting the answer, it's understanding the path you took.
Precisely. And the book links this directly to innovation.
How so?
It frames innovation as essentially a higher form of problem solving, and metacognition, being conscious of your own logic, is critical for that.
Okay. And then it connects this to Warren Berger's research on innovators.
Right. Berger studied innovative leaders and found they often ask similar types of questions. The big three are why, what if, and how.
Simple questions, but powerful.
Very. And the book argues that Berger's work basically captures the metacognitive processes of these leaders. It shows how they think, how they use questioning to drive towards new solutions.
So by looking at the questions, we see the thinking process. And this leads to what the book calls a problem-solving thinking logic map.
Yeah, think of it as the underlying structure, the invisible architecture that supports really effective problem solving and innovation.
Can you give examples of that map in action?
Sure, the book uses Airbnb.
Hmm.
The problem was finding lodging during busy conferences.
Right.
And Polaroid, the desire for instant photos, both came from identifying a need, a problem, and then iterating through questions and potential solutions.
So it's a cycle.
Yeah.
And the map has stages. What's the first step? Always.
Always identifying the problem. That's stage one. Discovering and raising questions about the situation.
Okay, then what?
Then you analyze, you think deeply about those questions, then you try things out, seek solutions, gather more info.
Experimentation, right?
Exactly. Then you evaluate how well your attempts worked, diagnose what went wrong or right.
Learn from it.
Then optimize your solutions based on that learning. And finally, that leads towards creative problem solving, maybe real innovation.
But it all hinges on that first step, nailing the actual problem.
Absolutely. Get that wrong, and the rest of the process is built on shaky ground.
Which brings us right back to the core of the book's method. Questioning. It seems like everything comes back to asking the right questions.
That's the central argument. Innovation isn't just magic. It's often about finding the optimal way to solve a problem.
And you can't find the optimal solution if you don't understand the real problem.
Precisely. So questioning is presented as the engine. It drives thinking, it uncovers hidden stuff, assumptions.
It reveals the essence of the problem.
Yeah. The book has this simple model. Questioning leads to thinking, which leads to innovation.
Okay, so we have those broad why, what if, how questions from Berger, but the book offers something more specific, decomposition questioning.
Right. That's the book's core methodology. It's more granular.
So what's the main idea? How does it work?
The basic idea is to take messy, unclear problems and break them down systematically.
Decompose them.
Exactly. By asking more and more specific, targeted questions. The book uses the analogy of peeling an onion.
Okay, I get that. Start with the outside layers.
The obvious stuff, the surface symptoms, and gradually ask questions that dig deeper and deeper towards the core issue.
And it's a 6-ring model. Can you walk us through those rings? What are the steps?
Sure. Ring 1 is basically observe, just look closely at the initial problem or situation.
Step 1, pay attention.
Right. Step 2, describe. Write down or articulate the current situation or maybe the desired outcome in as much detail as you can muster. Be specific.
Okay, observe, then describe thoroughly.
Step 3, break down that description. Pull out the key words or key phrases. What are the essential components?
Got it. Identify the main elements.
Step 4, ask exploratory questions about those specific keywords. What does this keyword mean here? Why is it important? How does it relate to others?
Question the components.
Step 5, answer those questions. Really think about them. Articulate the answers clearly. Don't just gloss over it.
Okay, think and answer.
Step 6 is where it gets iterative. You extract new keywords from the answers you just gave.
Ah, so the answers generate new points of focus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you repeat the cycle. Ask new questions about these new keywords. Think about and articulate those answers. You keep going.
Decomposing and answering. Decomposing and answering.
As many times as you need. Peeling more layers off that onion.
Until when? How do you know when you're done?
Well, the final step is to step back, look at all the issues and potential root causes you've uncovered through this questioning process, and then compare and evaluate them to figure out what the real core problem actually is.
So it's a cycle. Observe, describe, break down keywords, ask, answer, new keywords, ask, answer, and then evaluate.
That's the essence of it. Observation and description are the foundation. Decomposition and questioning are the engine. And solving the right problem is the goal.
It sounds really systematic, almost like a detective's process.
It kind of is, yeah. A structured way to investigate a problem.
And this isn't just for, like, business strategy or rocket science, right? The book gives everyday examples.
Oh, absolutely. It shows how you can apply this across the board.
Like what?
Improving personal relationships, for instance. Using questioning to understand what someone really means or feels beyond the surface words.
Hmm. Okay. Getting past assumptions.
Yeah. Or enhancing classroom teaching. There's a nice example about a spring writing assignment. Instead of just describe spring, the teacher used detailed sensory questions.
Like, what specific sounds do you hear? What does the air feel like on your skin?
Exactly. Pushing students to observe more closely and think more deeply, moving beyond cliches. That's decomposition questioning in action.
What about work?
Improving work efficiency. Instead of just reacting to customer complaints, using the method to dig into why the complaints are happening.
Yeah.
What's the root cause? A training issue? A product flaw? A process problem?
Finding the source instead of just patching the symptom.
Precisely. And even family issues. There's an example about a child reluctant to learn English. Through questioning, it turned out the kid wasn't against English itself, but was terrified of having to memorize endless lists of vocabulary words.
Ah, so the real problem was fear of rote memorization, not the language itself. Finding that out changes how you'd approach helping them.
Completely. So, in all these cases, the point is the same. Focus on finding the true problem first, using this structured questioning.
And then effective solutions, maybe even creative breakthroughs, become much more possible.
That's the core idea.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the big takeaway for me, and hopefully for you listening, is that the most vital step in tackling any challenge, big or small, is making sure you're asking the right questions from the start.
It really shifts the focus, doesn't it?
It does, and this deep dive into deconstructing has hopefully given you a really practical tool, this decomposition questioning six-ring model, to help you do just that.
The key message is resist that powerful urge to jump straight into fixing things.
Yeah, slow down the solutionary.
Exactly. Embrace the process of thoughtful questioning instead. Peel that onion, layer by layer, get to the core.
Because that's where the most effective and maybe even the most innovative solutions are often hiding.
Waiting to be discovered through good questions.
So here's a final thought to chew on. Think about a challenge, any challenge that's on your plate right now, big or small, work or life. Why not try applying just the first few steps of this decomposition questioning method later today? Really focus. Observe the situation carefully, describe it, maybe even write it down in as much detail as you can.
Yeah, specific.
Get really specific, and then just start asking why. Why is this situation the way it is? And when you get an answer, ask why about that answer. See where it leads.
Just follow that thread.
Yeah, and consider how that shift in focus from desperately seeking solutions to patiently exploring the problem itself, how might that change your whole approach? Not just to this one challenge, but to obstacles and opportunities in general, something to think about.